Australians feared among the dead in a Cambodia jet crash. Mourners' anger over royal response to Diana's death. And Pat Rafter on target at the US Open.
From National 9 News, this is Nightline with Jim Waley.
Good evening. A passenger jet has crashed in Cambodia, claiming at least 64 lives. There are reports that some on board the Tupolev 134 were Australians, although the Foreign Affairs Department is yet to confirm this. The Vietnam Airlines pilot was apparently trying to abort a landing during bad weather when he crashed.
The Russian-built Tupolev was flying from Ho Chi Minh City when it clipped palm trees near Cambodia's capital, Phnom Penh. It hit the ground and exploded. Police say at least 62 people died when the jet went down in a paddy field about 300 meters south of the runway. It happened in torrential rain. 2 adults and 2 children are said to have survived, although other reports say only 2 or perhaps 3 people are still alive. The plane, according to one report, overshot the runway. It was making its second attempt to land. Vietnam airline officials say most of the 60 passengers on board were foreigners, including Australians, Japanese, Americans and Canadians. There were also 6 crew. The Australian consul in Phnom Penh, Peter Grant, has arrived at the airport and is trying now to find out if any Australians were in fact on the plane. Hugh Rimmington for Nightline.
With 7 paparazzi already charged over Princess Diana's fatal car crash, attention tonight has again turned to the driver of the vehicle. Not only was Henry Paul drunk and speeding, it also appears he didn't have the appropriate license for limousine drivers. The latest claim is expected to help the photographer's arguments that French officials are looking for someone to blame for the tragedy.
After 2 days in jail, the 6 photographers and a motorcycle rider are free tonight, themselves evading the huge media presence outside Paris's Palais de Justice. Charges their lawyers say are to appease the public, not find justice.
It's only the quality, exceptional quality of the victims, which explains this, with this theatralization, all this mess about these guys.
The first charge, involuntary manslaughter, relates to the paparazzi's actions before the crash. Some witnesses suggest they swarmed the black Mercedes as it entered the tunnel. The second charge involves what happened afterwards, taking photos instead of helping the victims in the car. In France, failure to come to the aid of people in danger is a serious criminal offence. The accident reportedly happened at 12:20. The first call to police logged at 12:27. Police didn't arrive at the scene until 12:40, allowing photographers 20 uninterrupted minutes.
Some of the photographers try to... they asked some of their colleagues not to call the police, to have more time to take pictures.
One photographer, Romuald Rat, is said to have checked the princess's pulse when taking pictures. A report filed by the first police arriving at the scene is also damning. Officers claiming the photographers were aggressive and pushy, preventing me from helping the victim, in this case the princess. Another said, I couldn't hold back the photographers and help the injured at the same time. One of the paparazzi who was forcibly removed swore at police, saying, you make me sick, let me do my job.
These people were not willing to push themselves and move to help these people who were dying.
Is this conclusive proof of manslaughter?
Yes, yes, definitely.
Police are still searching for several other photographers who were in the tunnel that night but evaded arrest. Photos of the crash victims have already been offered electronically around Europe, but so far no one has published them. But today pictures were published of Dodi and Diana after their dinner at the Ritz as they left on the ride that claimed their lives. The paparazzi investigation doesn't take much heat off the driver, Henri Paul, who, according to most recent police reports, was 4 times the legal alcohol limit in France, not 3 as previously stated. The security officer was apparently off duty when he was unexpectedly called in from home to drive the couple. Today, a woman who knew the former Air Force officer said he was usually so correct. It's now been revealed the one person who can provide vital clues about the accident, the sole survivor, bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones, is physically incapable of speaking. The force of the accident smashed his jaw and caused massive facial injuries. The other concern, even when he is finally able to communicate, how much will he be able to remember of the tragic crash? In Paris, Daniel Blyde reporting for Nightline.
In London, the royal family is finding itself targeted over its response to Diana's death. There's concern, too, over the human wave expected to sweep into London for the princess's funeral. Giant television screens will be erected in Hyde Park and the funeral route extended so more people can say goodbye in safety.
Another night without Diana, another astonishing display of respect. Despite the hour, despite the London chill, thousands waited their turn to say goodbye.
I'd just probably say that she's simply the best. She's the Queen of Hearts.
While the queues grow ever longer around St James's Palace, there is still no sign of the royal family. They remain in Scotland, the people growing ever angrier that their princess has been left alone.
I think they treated her terrible, absolutely shocking. I don't think they're the most cold people on this earth.
Now, I know it's tradition that the flag flies at Buckingham Palace when only the royalty are there, but I really would have liked to have seen the flag flying half-mast there as well.
I think it's disgusting that they're not here to see how the British people feel about the monarchy.
Let them see what the people think of her. They should be on that balcony now.
There are now more than 40 books of condolence inside the palace in an attempt to ease the congestion. Congestion that may increase when more than 1 million mourners line the streets of London on Saturday for Diana's funeral.
Being here, you realise what it's all about.
I didn't want to see this occasion go past without it being marked in some way, really.
Expected to follow Diana's coffin on Saturday will be her sons Prince William and Prince Harry. It's reported they are insisting on walking the route to Westminster Abbey. 500 members from the 100 charities the Princess of Wales supported will also join the procession.
It's the borderline between a state royal occasion and a sort of national overwhelming sense by so many people that they were her friends, that it's got to be both private and public and unique in that sense.
And at the end of the service, there will be a minute's silence across Britain.
Before her coffin sets off, a minute to just be still is probably the greatest tribute to a frantic life that was invented one summer's afternoon in 1980.
People are being urged to line the route after the service as the funeral procession heads out of London in a bid to ease the crush. It will be the biggest day of mourning in Britain in modern times. When the Prince and Princess of Wales divorced, Diana lost the title Her Royal Highness. She also lost the compulsory security service that protects the royal family, security that may have prevented this tragedy. Security such as this. Diana did not want such protection in her single days, but if she remained Her Royal Highness, she would have had no choice.
Having a chase vehicle behind you to try and block the following motorcycles, there are a number of things you can do.
It's now mid-afternoon in London. The crowds around St James's Palace continue to swell, so too the frustration. And the most common question being asked, where is the royal family?
The palace has been very mean to Princess Diana, our queen, and they are mean to her when she is dead.
The royal family, after this, are finished as far as I'm concerned.
In London, Mark Ferguson for Nightline.
The trade unions say they're ready for a bitter confrontation with the government over moves to reform the waterfront. ACTU Secretary Bill KELTY has warned the Prime Minister he faces an intensive industrial campaign if the coalition pushes ahead with plans to take on maritime unions.
If there ever were any doubts, ACTU Secretary Bill KELTY has certainly dispelled them. The wharves will be the major battleground between a government determined to break the power of the waterfront unions and a union movement equally determined to draw the line on the coalition's industrial reforms.
The only promise I make to John Howard is this. If you seek to destroy the Maritime Union of Australia, we will be there. And you won't have a picket of 30 people or a picket of 40 people. You won't have a picket of 500 people. You will have the biggest picket that's ever been assembled in the history of this country.
That may have been applauded by delegates at the ACTU Congress, but it raised the ire of the Prime Minister, who accused Mr KELTY of losing touch with ordinary Australian workers.
You're not talking here about the quintessential Aussie battler. The Wharfie's no longer an Aussie battler, we all know that. You're talking here about people who are paid $80,000 to $90,000 a year.
On the economy, meanwhile, better news for the government, with the latest national accounts confirming the recovery is well underway and gathering pace. During the June quarter, the economy grew by more than 1%.
It's a very strong figure, this, a good figure.
The Treasurer believes that should help boost employment over coming months, but the opposition says the economy is still not growing strongly enough.
That's why unemployment has been going up. That's why there's still enormous job insecurity amongst the Australian workforce.
Laurie Wilson reporting for Nightline.
Residents of Sydney's southwest and environmental groups have vowed to campaign against government plans to build a new nuclear reactor at Lucas Heights. The government says the reactor is urgently needed to replace obsolete technology in the present 38-year-old plant.
Located just 35 kilometres from the centre of Sydney, the Lucas Heights reactor has always been controversial. It's now well past its use-by date, and the government has announced a new reactor will be built on the same site. Residents immediately vowing to fight the plans.
I was under the impression that they were going to move it, and now they're building a bigger one. Yeah, not impressed.
Environmentally, I think it's a disaster.
Labor also voiced its opposition, saying a nuclear plant and surrounding high population do not mix.
When the reactor was put at Lucas Heights, it was in the bush. It's not in the bush now.
But Science Minister Peter McGorran says the decision to replace the reactor is a life and death issue, with thousands of Australians needing nuclear medicine.
You are scaremongering. You never made a decision in government on this issue. You can't make a decision now. You are a coward and you're putting Australian lives at risk.
The new reactor is expected to be in operation from about 2005. The government, meantime, has announced it's ruled out Holsworthy as a possible site for Sydney's second airport. Although locals have campaigned long and hard against the idea, the government says it's ruled out Holsworthy simply because of environmental concerns.
The site at Holsworthy had the potential to affect more people with aircraft noise than the site at Badgerys Creek.
A full environmental impact study will now be carried out at Badgerys Creek, but it will be next year before the government decides whether to give that site in Sydney's west the nod. Raymond Dale for Nightline.
After the break, parents found guilty of selling their young daughter for sex, and bidding intensifies for the 2004 Olympics. The parents of an 11-year-old Queensland girl have been found guilty of selling her for sex. The jury in Ipswich also convicted the man she was sold to. The judge said it would be hard to find a more distressing case.
The judge called it horrendous. The parents of an 11-year-old girl accused of ordering her to have sex with 67-year-old Roy Schloss for $20. Allegations too, the Ipswich businessman paid the girl's mother $400 to keep her quiet. Schloss's counsel, Peter Nolan, claimed radical inconsistencies in the girl's story, that it changes. Like some sort of virus, it develops a new head every time you try to kill it. Before the jury retired, Judge Robertson warned before you can convict any of the accused, you'd have to be satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt she's both truthful and reliable. The jury obviously thought so, finding the parents guilty of rape and procuring a child for unlawful carnal knowledge. Schloss also found guilty of the same charges and 2 others of attempted rape. When asked if they had anything to say, the girl's parents declined. But Schloss said he wasn't guilty and that in time it would be proven the girl is lying. They were remanded in custody for sentencing later this month. Paul Murphy for Nightline.
A Melbourne court has heard that a man accused of running a heroin trafficking business had more than $1 million in cash buried in his parents' backyard. The committal hearing was told Alexander Catalone's mother and father was stunned when the money was unearthed and told police it wasn't theirs. Cataloni and his de facto wife, Marissa Michel, both face charges, Cataloni allegedly having said he was making $50,000 a week from trafficking. Former rugby league international Mark Geyer was in court today on assault charges. The Perth captain is accused of punching Nicole Darrington in the face during an argument at a teammate's 21st birthday celebrations. Ms. Darrington says Geyer was behaving like a raving lunatic. He denies the charges. It doesn't seem very long ago that the word Sydney spilled from the lips of Olympic chief Juan Antonio Samaranch, sparking unprecedented excitement here. Now, though, frantic last-minute lobbying is underway by the cities bidding for the 2004 Games. Stockholm, Rome, Athens, Buenos Aires and Cape Town are candidates in Friday's vote. Michael Usher is in Lausanne.
In the Olympic capital, a festival of colour and culture. The Olympic Committee is in its final days before deciding the host city for 2004. Cape Town, Rome, Athens, Buenos Aires and Stockholm are the 5 finalists, and they're doing all they can to impress. An outsider in the early days, the vibrant Cape Town bid has hit Lausanne en masse. But behind the show, there's some serious negotiating and schmoozing.
It's a very open competition, so that increases the tension.
Wherever an IOC member goes, the bid cities go too. It's here you realise the Olympics is more than just sport, it's big business and powerful politics. A city can spend at least $20 million to bid, then to win, like Sydney, spend over $5 billion staging the event. Rome and Athens have been early favourites, but they're saying for the first time ever, it's an even race. It's sometimes said in sport that winning isn't everything, and the same can be said for this contest. For the losing cities, just getting through to the finals can make them a player on the world stage. They may not win the games, but they can certainly reap the rewards through substantial business interest and tourism. In Lausanne, Switzerland, Michael Usher for Nightline.
In the United States, a young couple has been mistakenly shot dead by modern-day bounty hunters who raided the wrong house. The incident has led to calls for greater controls on the bounty hunters, who are virtually a law unto themselves.
The bounty hunters, wearing balaclavas and bulletproof vests, burst into this house, tied up this woman, threatened her children, then headed for the room where Chris Foote and his girlfriend were asleep.
They kicked in the door and I mean, they just opened fire on him.
They just unloaded on him. And there's 27 holes in his wall in his room.
Before he and his girlfriend died in the hail of bullets, Chris Foote did fire back, wounding 2 of the bounty hunters. All of them now face murder charges. Tragically, Chris Foote was not the man they were looking for. They'd raided the wrong house. Technically, this raid, which went so tragically wrong, was legal, infuriating the victims' families.
It's not the Old West, and it's wrong. They shouldn't have them.
Meanwhile, police have finally found Philip Johnson, suspected of the biggest robbery in American history. Police say he stole $30 million from this bank office last March. But after he was captured at a border post, police recovered just $12,000. They suspect Johnson has buried the money, and he's not telling them where. In the United States, Nick McCallum for Nightline.
In Britain, a little home help is the staple of many households. So, some years ago, when an American couple went to live in London, they hired a nanny. To them, initially, she was just a young girl who clearly loved children, but came to be so much more.
This was the nanny, a shy 19-year-old who loved working with children.
I only worked 3 days a week at kindergarten, and the other 2 I looked after an American baby boy.
That American boy was Patrick Robertson. His parents, Pat and Mary, had moved to London in early 1980. They needed a nanny.
We never knew until much later on that she, had a title or personal wealth. She just came along as a normal part-time nanny.
They found out she was Lady Diana Spencer by accident.
She just continued to smile and do as I ask and look after Patrick. She was wonderful. It's just hysterical that I paid, Princess Diana $5 an hour to babysit for me.
7 months after Diana began working for the Robertsons on this London street, everything changed. Diana came to Mary, saying a crowd of reporters was outside, waiting for her.
I asked her why, and she said she'd spent the weekend up at Balmoral with Charles. But she specified, and it was adorable, but he didn't ask me, his mother did.
This picture of Diana with Patrick was taken by a photographer that day. It was the beginning of her relationship with the press.
She'd call some mornings and just say that she couldn't bear to leave her apartment and get out and face the crowds on the outside her door.
By Christmas, the Robertsons had moved back to the States. 2 months later, Charles and Diana were engaged.
In May, the invitation to the wedding and to the party at the palace showed up.
The Robertsons were among the few American couples invited. They sat just across from Margaret Thatcher.
Pat and I were just pinching ourselves the whole time.
After the wedding, Diana stayed in touch. When she came to the U.S. in 1985 on her first state visit with Charles, she escaped her official duties to have Charles meet Patrick and the Robertsons at the British Embassy. 5 years ago, she had the family to lunch at Kensington Palace.
And she just came bursting through the door, and I sort of said, gosh, you know, shouldn't I curtsy or do something? And she said, absolutely not. I loathe formality, and just came over and gave me a big hug.
It was the last time they saw her.
Just as it looked as if maybe she was going to get a little peace and quiet and privacy, it just seems so outrageously unfair.
And so this family grieves in a special way for a nanny named Diana, whose references were fit for a queen.
In a moment, all the latest sport, including Pat Rafter's great win at the US Open, relief for St Kilda at the AFL Tribunal, and injury woes for the North Sydney Bears. Australia's flag is flying high at the US Open tennis, with Pat Rafter through to the quarterfinals and now second favourite for the title. He next faces Swede Magnus Larsson after beating former champion Andre Agassi in 4 sets.
While the lesser-knowns went at it on the outside courts, the big boys showed how it's really done.
Oh, yes.
Agassi and Rafter were the evening's main attraction, with the Aussie winning the key first set.
Game. First set to Rafter.
It should have been Agassi asking for help, as Rafter jumped to a 2-sets-to-love lead. In the third, the Australian led 4-1, the result seemingly assured. But Agassi had other ideas.
Oh, he got another one of those.
With the home crowd riding his every shot, the former champion staged a great fight back.
Oh, what a shot. What a shot.
But Agassi couldn't sustain his charge. Rafter again grabbed the early break, and from there the American ran out of puff.
There it is. He's done it.
You know, if it went into the 5th set, it would have been hurting.
Michael Chang was in all sorts of strife in his match against Cedric Pioline. Down a set and trailing 5-2 in the 4th, the number 2 seed needed all his skill to stay in the Open. No such fight back from the women's 2nd seed. Salas had her chances, but Spilea played the match of her life.
Talk about athletic ability to watch this one. Is that some shot or what?
Clinton Fletcher for Nightline.
In AFL, a big relief for St Kilda tonight, with skipper Stuart Lowe cleared by the tribunal. Michael Roberts has the latest.
It's been a nervous couple of days' wait for St Kilda fans, with several of the faithful turning up at the tribunal tonight to support Stuart Lowe. Lowe was reported for intentionally attempting to trip Port Adelaide's Shane Bond, and in less than an hour, the news was good. In evidence, umpire Hayden Kennedy said there was a definite swinging motion of Lowe's right leg, but Lowe claimed he was only attempting to regain his balance in the soft turf. The co-captain, who leads the competition in marks, is free to line up at centre-half forward against Brisbane on Sunday.
It's been a worrying couple of days, but you know, this is a fantastic opportunity for the club, and really I just want to do my bit towards that and hopefully get there for the big one at the end of the month.
Meanwhile, the Lions have so far managed to elude the pressures confronting their opponents as they attempt to turn around a lapse in form.
But I think it'll give them renewed enthusiasm to say, well, gee, OK, our season was over, but now it's not. Now we've got another chance at participating in the 97 finals.
Michael Roberts for Nightline.
To Rugby League, and Sydney City will be back to full strength for Saturday's minor qualifying final. Not so their opponents, North Sydney. The Bears are still smarting from last week's loss to an understrength Roosters outfit and could be without star forward David Fairley.
Fairley's been named in North's team, but the chronic ankle injury has put plans of playing on ice.
At this stage, I can't get into a jog, so unless something sort of major happens by Friday, I'm probably very doubtful.
The ankle flared again when Fairley set up this try during last Saturday's loss to Sydney City. As Fairley limped off, he passed a full bench of Roosters being rested. But while he's likely to be sidelined for Saturday's rematch, they'll all play. A tactic Fairley describes as good coaching by Sydney City's Phil Gould.
This week he's got all his good players back and they're all fit, so it was a good move, I guess.
Plenty of movers and shakers on hand for the book launch of former ARL boss Ken Arthurson. In My Game, Arthurson gives his version of what happened in the Super League war. Mere names evoking bad memories.
Ken Cowley's gone, Rebo, Morgan, Carden, and of course, I can hardly get the name out.
Close friend and ex-Canterbury power broker Peter Moore attended the launch. Arthurson accepting Moore's claim he played no part in the Bulldogs' defection from the ARL.
Peter's told me that he was not involved in the move for Canterbury to go over to Super League, and I accept what he's told me.
Andrew McKinlay for Nightline.
Shane Warne's newest teammate made her first public appearance today. The Spin King's baby daughter was the centre of attention at her father's book launch in Melbourne today. 10-week-old Brooke was born while Warne was on the Ashes tour. As for fatherhood, he reckons it was easier writing the book. Still to come on Nightline, the finance and the national weather. In finance news, Kerry Packers Publishing and Broadcasting plans to spin off its 15% stake in Fairfax into a listed unit trust after the government shelved a decision to change Australia's cross-media laws. This as PBL announced a net profit for the year of $182 million, a fall of 19% after abnormals. On the markets, meanwhile, a record overnight surge of 257 points on Wall Street pushed Australian shares 37 points higher today. In Tokyo, the Nikkei was up 502 points. In London tonight, the FT100 is almost 45 points up in morning trading. Gold is fetching $321.65 US an ounce, and in European trading tonight, the Australian dollar is buying 72.85 US cents, 1.32 Deutschmarks, 88 yen, and 45p. The national weather, and there's a series of lows in the bite with a cold front approaching the southeast. There are also lows over northern Australia with a high nearing the west. The forecast fine for Brisbane and Darwin, rain developing in Sydney, showers for Canberra, Melbourne, Hobart and Adelaide, and in Perth it should be a fine day tomorrow. That's the news this Wednesday night from all of us here at Nightline. Good night.